the tribal boundaries, Abrahamic covenanted land boundaries, and the exile land. I have had an interest in mapping the land very shortly after coming to faith. And I have specifically studied a great deal with regards to the northern tribes and their land boundaries. And the reason for it is because I am aware of my tribe only because the Creator has told me. It's not from any research that I've done, because how could I ever find out what my tribal lineage is? But once you know what your tribe is, you want to know where it's supposed to be. And it's only been this week that I've done the research on the southern tribes. And the real reason that I did the research into the southern tribes is because I was going through Genesis again, trying to reintroduce myself to the Torah. And I saw something that was really interesting to me, because I always had read that Abraham was in Ur, and again, that's where he was born. And I'm going to show you where Ur is because it's a factor in our tribal land. It's in the lowest portion of Iraq, and it's actually Upper Kuwait. It's where the Euphrates empties out into the sea that then goes out to the Strait of Hormuz and then out to the Indian Ocean. But when he left Ur, he did not go to Canaan. He went to Haran. Well, Haran is very well known. There's still the city of Haran today, and is actually Turkey, Lower Turkey. And I'll show you a map of Haran. And as you can see from the map, it's a very lush area. And Turkey's lush anyway, and this is even more lush. And it's got a river that goes through the middle of it. It still has a city named Haran, but it has a river going through it that joins up with the Euphrates and goes out. So throughout time, we've been thinking of Abrahamic covenanted land, and we've looked for the Euphrates, but we don't know where the northern border is. Well, the Creator told us in Genesis that this is our northern border. And again, to find Haran, if you're looking for it, now again, I've given you a map, but if you want to actually go out and look for it, it's very easy. Look for the farthest corner, and actually it would, wow, it's going to probably look like this for y'all. As you see the top of the Mediterranean, where Turkey comes across and Syria is coming up, look for that point and go over 150 miles, and that's Haran. And let's go through some of the verses, because there are some amazing verses. So, and it's showing, and right now I'm just kind of walking through the Abrahamic covenanted land, and I'm giving you the background, and then I'm going to give you the map for the Abrahamic covenanted land, and then we'll go from there. But in Genesis 11:31, Terah, which is Abraham's father, took Abraham, his grandson Lot, daughter-in-law Sarah, and his wife of his son Abram, and together they went out from Ur. They were going to go to Canaan, but when they came to Haran, they settled there. And in Genesis 12:4, so Abraham went as the Lord had told him with Lot. Abraham was 75 when they set out from Haran. Now, and so you can read in Genesis 12 as they come down. And then you come to Genesis 12:9, and he actually goes south. Now, your Bible will actually say Abraham set out and continued toward Negev, or the Negev desert. And many of the Bible translations will say that. But in fact, it just says south. It doesn't say the Negev. That's been an added word. And from there, where did he go? Well, Genesis 12:10 says he then goes over to Egypt. Genesis 12:10, now there was a famine in the land, and Abraham went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. Now, why is that trip important? Okay? And remember, this is Genesis 11 and 12, and in Genesis 13, the Lord said to Abram after Lot had parted from him, look around from where you are to the north, to the south, to the east, and the west. In verse 15, all the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. And then in verse 17, 13, 17, go walk throughout the length and the breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you. So he is to walk the full length and breadth. So where is that land? Okay? And if you try to look, if you do an internet search just saying Abrahamic covenanted land, you're going to get some horrible graphs. And not one of them, from what I can see, is right. Because they'll either say it starts from the river of Egypt, and they'll say that's the Nile, and then they go down the Nile for however long they want to, and then they go over. They all get where the Euphrates empties in, and they get that right, and they go up the Euphrates for some point and then come over. But none of them are consistent on how far north they go. And so if we look at Genesis 15, on that day the Lord made a covenant with Abraham and said to your descendants, verse 18, to your descendants I give this from the river of Egypt to the great river the Euphrates. Okay? So we have this now, this location that is from Euphrates to the river of Egypt. But we don't know what the river of Egypt is. And most people think of only two options, but there are three options. And it in fact is the third option that they don't think about, which is the correct option. The three options are either one, the Nile. That doesn't work because of Goshen. The second one, there's a small river that comes, or a brook that comes up in the Sinai, and some of them have called that the river of Egypt because they're trying to say that's it. That doesn't work for a number of other reasons, specifically mileage, but there's actually another verse that eliminates that as well and says that it's only the third option that works. Now, let's kind of work through, because again, if you're looking at this, most of the people will say, well, no, it's got to be the Nile, because that's the river of Egypt, because this other thing hasn't had water for probably 2,000 years, this brook or wadi that's in Sinai. And the problem with that is when the Israelites went to Egypt, they settled in Goshen. The scientists have informed us that Goshen is to the east of the Nile. That means if it was the Nile River, that means the Israelites were never in Egypt because they were in Goshen. And if Abrahamic covenant land was the Nile, then they weren't in slavery in Egypt because they were in slavery in Abrahamic covenanted land. So that doesn't work. You know, it also says they left Egypt. Why would they leave Egypt? They didn't have to. If they were already in Abrahamic covenanted land, they were already there. And that's where really it's important that they went across the Red Sea and not up the way of the Philistines, which would have been going up the coastal. Because if they would have went up the coastal, they would have been in Abrahamic covenanted land. They did not, Moses didn't go into Abrahamic covenanted land. So when they crossed the Red Sea, wherever that is, and I'm not trying to get into the argument of whether it's in the Sinai or whether it is in Saudi Arabia, I don't care. We'll find out where Mount Sinai is. But they crossed to the bottom of it. They walked across the bottom of Abrahamic covenanted land. But they didn't go into the land. Okay? Now, there is this great verse as well. Now, we know from Ezekiel 48:28 that when we deal with our own tribal lands, it will go to the brook, the river of Egypt. So we know that that is the border of the southern tribes. And there's so much more involved. Okay, so we have these two options, but I think there's a third, and that is what I would say is the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. But it doesn't really matter what I think. The issue is, what does the Bible say about it? And if we go to Exodus 23:1, I will establish your borders from the Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, and from the desert to the Euphrates River. It was very clear here he was talking the Red Sea, which we would think of as the Suez Canal as a current time. So it's going all the way up, because it says from the Red Sea up to the Mediterranean. That is currently the Suez Canal. If you're in the tribe of Gad, you're going to be on the Suez Canal. Why is that also important? Because the Sinai is part of Asia. Our tribal land is Asia. Egypt is Africa. Sinai is Asia. Okay? So only when you cross the Suez Canal do you actually go into Africa. So we actually have this thing locked in. Well, there's something else that's really amazing about that, and that is the spacing. Now again, from Abrahamic covenanted land, we can show where that is, going all the way up, and it's a huge segment of covenanted land. But when we deal with the tribal lands, as we look at the northern tribes, which are Dan, Asher, Naphtali, Manasseh, Ephraim, Reuben, and Judah, those are the new northern tribes. Each of those, as I've done my mapping, is 28.5 miles north to south. Now, their east to west may be somewhat different, but their north to south is pretty consistent. Now, you could argue to say, well, wow, some of those things are a little bit wider than the others. Yeah, but they also have mountains in them, so mountains aren't really that beneficial. So they're all roughly equal, as the Creator would treat us equally. And in the southern, if you look at the coastline, if you look from the Suez Canal and go all the way up to where the Princess portion is, it would work out to each tribe has 30 miles along the coast. And that's amazing. And it adds a lot of flavor to what's going on. Now, again, because it's coming around a curve, those tribal lands in the south, they're going to have segments that are curving out. Do I know where those are? No, I don't. Okay? He's not told me, and to the extent that he has, I don't understand what he's saying on some of these things, but they're going to curve a little bit. Where they are, I don't know. Now, there's some other amazing things when you consider the fact it is turning like that. One, all of the tribes, when we go back, are going to have houses. There are houses there now, or we're going to take over somebody else's house. We'll get their furniture. Okay, they've planted gardens. We're taking their gardens. Okay, is everybody going to have a garden? No. But most people, most of us, we're going to have houses that somebody has left as they fled the area. And if the people, and you may ask, well, what about the people who currently live in Israel? Well, they won't. Most of them will not be living in Israel. They will be kicked out of Israel proper, or what I should say is our tribal land proper. And if that's unpopular, then take it up with the Creator of the universe. He's the one who's indicated it. And you can say, well, where are they going to go? Well, remember, they are still genetic, so they don't leave Abrahamic covenanted land. They just go into Amman. Now, Amman is not just the capital of Jordan, it's a region around the capital. So as I draw it into my map here, you're going to see it as part of, including Ibid. Jordan, which is another major area. It's probably going further east, but I don't know exactly where those borders are as it deals with the land that is for those people who are currently in Egypt, or sorry, currently in Israel, who do not leave at the correct timing. And specifically, if they don't leave when the Exodus starts, and if they are not beheaded for refusal of the mark of the beast and following the Messiah and following Torah. So, because those that do, they could come in on the first resurrection. But if they don't do that, then they are the exiles. And the exiles from Zephaniah 2:9, they're going to inherit the land of Ammon. So that's a real interesting thing. And we see that in Revelation as well, as it talks about the churches. Read the Church of Philadelphia, what has to be said. And specifically those who are currently the tribe of Judah, when they leave and they become the tribe of Judah, as they leave for the Exodus or they're in the first resurrection because they obey, the other people who are in what is currently Israel, they have to acknowledge that these are the true members of the tribe, because they will be in tribal land, and everybody else, those who are currently in Israel who do not do this, they'll be going into the exile land, which is again still in Abrahamic covenanted land, but it's not tribal land. So, and again, as we look at the tribal land, remember on the southern, they should have 30 miles worth of Mediterranean Sea as their coast, and the northern should have about 28.5 miles. There is something also amazing in that, and that comes from Deuteronomy 33, as Moses is giving the blessings to the tribes. Because for Zebulun and Issachar, he says, rejoice at Zebulun and you're going out, and you, Issachar, in your tents. Well, why is that? Well, if you look at the land that is going to be, as I've mapped it out here for Issachar and Zebulun, it's not a populated area. There are very few cities there and towns there. There's probably, not even probably, there's not enough houses there to house that entire tribe. So, because then we know they'll be in their tents. Now, how long are they going to be in their tents? Not long, because they're going to build houses, okay? But at least initially, when most of the others in our tribes are going to be in houses, they will be in tents. Now, you could say, well, that's really rough if you're one of those tribes. Trust me. They will be some nice tents, number one. And number two, and much more importantly, that's going to be two wealthy tribes. Now let's look at Deuteronomy 33:19. They will summon people to the mountain, and there they will offer sacrifices to the righteous, and they will feast on the abundance of the seas. So they're going to be seafarers, fishermen, people with boats. Whether or not they get the boats that we take over to the Exodus with, I think they probably will. But they're also going to feast on the treasures hidden in the sand. What's that telling you? It tells you that these people are going to be wealthy with regards to the mines. If you want to find the tribe that's going to pull out the most gold from the earth or the most silver from the earth, it's Zebulun or Issachar. If you want to find out the ones who pull the diamonds out of the earth or the sapphires out of the earth, it's Zebulun and Issachar. They have the land of these amazing things that are coming out of the earth. Not just, and it says treasures hidden in the sand. Maybe they mean some type of plant. It could be, but I think it's totally, I think it's gemstones, gold and silver. I think they are going to be the wealthy tribe. So, and I hope I've kind of shown you that, again, it pretty much has to be the Suez Canal as to our border, because again, our border is going to go all the way to Egypt. And so what's the border of Egypt? Well, it's either somewhere in the Sinai, wherever we artificially created, or it's where Asia meets Egypt, or Africa, and that is, Sinai is all part of Asia. And when it says it going to the Red Sea, And that should be pretty clear to us that it is going all the way to the Suez. And again, because of that, Gad is going to have plenty of housing, because there's plenty of housing as you go down the Suez. And the only tribes that I would say are kind of almost left out on that, because we've got Gad, which has plenty of housing on the farthest, closest to Egypt. They don't have anything really in the Sinai. There's basically right on that border. Then we come over to Zebulon and then Issachar, and they don't have enough housing, but they have the wealth in the soil. Then we have Simeon. Simeon is a very small tribe when we get to on the other side of the Exodus. They are, other than Levi, they're the smallest tribe other than Levi, so the second smallest tribe. So there aren't that many houses there, but then again, there's enough houses for them because they're small enough at that time. Will they build more houses? Of course they will, just like we all will. And again, we're going to be building houses that should last 1,000 years. So, hey, great, because we're going to be there for 1,000 years. Well, I'm not saying we'll all live 1,000 years. I don't think that's going to happen, but our families will be there for 1,000 years. And then we, at some point in time, we're going to die and we'll come back in the second resurrection. That's great. That's fine for us. But Simeon and Benjamin, their land should be touching on the Dead Sea. And we have this amazing little prophecy that the Gaza Strip is really going to be inhabited by the goats and the wildlife. And so the land that Benjamin should have on the Mediterranean, Benjamin should have some land on the Mediterranean, but and maybe not. Maybe their land is just for animals at that little segment around the Mediterranean. And the same thing for Simeon. Their tribal land, as it hits the Mediterranean, they don't really get to use their Mediterranean section. But as the Creator is fair, why is that? Because they have the Dead Sea on their border on the other side. And what would you rather have? The Dead Sea, which is going to be like the Garden of the Garden of Eden, or the Mediterranean? And the Creator said, I'm going to give you the better, which is the Dead Sea, but I'm not going to give you water on both sides. That wouldn't be fair to the other tribes. So they don't have that. Okay. Now the only other one that really has water on the other side is going to be Ephraim, who has the Sea of Galilee and the Mediterranean. That's Ephraim. He's tribal leader. He can do what he wants, and great for him. Okay. He may not have the biggest land, but he's got some great land, and he's bordered on water on both sides. Great. Okay. But the Creator's kind of kept it even for the other tribes. Some of them have the Mediterranean, some of them have the Dead Sea. Again, you'd rather have the Dead Sea if you could have it, but not everybody gets it. There's only two of the tribes are going to have that. And so here I've tried to map out where these things are for the land. And the difference here is you're never going to find one if you go on the internet to try to look at Ezekiel 48 on a map. They all try to either go down or they'll try to squeeze everything into going up to that little spot in the Sinai Peninsula, or they'll try to go down. But that's not true. Like I said, it goes all the way over to the Suez, and they all have Mediterranean waterfront. Each of the tribes is going to have that. Now, that doesn't mean each of the clans will have that, because our tribal land is then divided by the clans by lot, and some of them will have the Mediterranean, some of them are going to have land that's farther inland, and if you're Zebulon or Issachar and you don't have the Mediterranean, well, celebrate, because you're probably going to have a lot of gold and silver in the soil. If you are up around Dan or Asher or Naphtali and you don't get the Mediterranean, then I can tell you right now, you're going to be a farmer, and that is some very productive land up there. And now it's productive. Wait until it is watered from the deep, from the abyss, which is what's going to happen. Now it's going to have more rain as well, but it's also going to be water from the ground up, just like in the time before Noah. So it's going to be amazingly productive. There's this beautiful lake that's in Naphtali's land, that's back in the Kaw Valley, and again, beautiful land back there. Not my tribal land, but it's beautiful, and I can recognize beauty when I see it, and that is absolutely beautiful. But again, we're each going to have our own land, and I'm trying to give you an idea of what that will be. And if you've got any questions on it, don't hesitate to contact me on it.